seminar. So if you're watching this down the road, then again, fast forward and jump into the good stuff. About 10 minutes or so. So fast forward through as you guys are jumping on. Let's see. But anywho's, we'll wait and see. Let some folks build on here. But yeah, when you're watching this down the road, fast forward on down to the good stuff. And we got a couple of guys from the MPFL. No, I think first up we've got a couple of MLF guys coming in. So looking forward to this one, and then a couple more seminars this afternoon. So we'll see how it goes. I'm gonna put it on mute, and we'll get started here in just a little bit.
Alrighty, folks, we're going to get started with our next Q&A session here in just a few minutes. If y'all would make your way down here. Nobody here is going to be offended that you eat and talk at the same time, so y'all come on down. On this section, we're going to have Cliff Pace and Greg Benson answering anything and everything you can come up with. I already told both of them if it kind of dies out, they're going to sit here and talk to each other about their war stories. So we'll see what happens, and we'll go from there.
All right, you guys got any questions? What's on your mind? There we go. What's that? Baits we use year round. For me, the first one that comes to mind is a jig, because I can do so many different things in so many different areas. You know, I can speed up the retrieve, I can fish it slower on the bottom, you know, swim it, I can pitch and flip it. So, you know, it's just a versatile bait that the fish, as many years as they've seen a jig, they're still eating, you know, as good as they ever have, if you do it right. So that'd be the first one I'd mention. Another one for me is a jerkbait. That's one that I lean on a lot, you know, and it's kind of funny, you know, I did a lot of damage with a jerkbait because I felt like people in other areas that we're going to weren't throwing it, they weren't seeing it that much. And so I kind of had an advantage, I feel like I had an advantage using it in places and in situations where people weren't, maybe they hadn't seen it as much there. Now that's, after 2 classics have been won on it, you've seen the guys winning on, you know, using forward sonar like live scope. Now they're seeing it a whole lot more, so I'm kind of having to think through that one, but definitely that jig and jerkbait for me.
I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm way too complicated of a human being to say, here's a couple of baits that I'm gonna have tied on year round. You know, fishing has reached a point with the benefit of technology and the knowledge everybody has to where you used to hear guys talk about, oh, this little bait right here is a really good niche bait. You know, when the fish are doing this, blah, 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 X, Y, Z. This bait is a niche bait. Fishing, because of so much knowledge that's been passed around over the last 8 or 10 years, I feel like every bait that we own now has become a niche bait. Our fish are so much more conditioned than they used to be, and they get so much more pressure than they used to be. They can't hide like they used to could hide. You know, it's funny, he said something about live sonar. You know, when the Alabama rig first came out, that was really the first time that all those fish in all these lakes, and whenever they got done with their postpone deal, they went out there and got grouped up in them little hard spots and stuff like that, and then as the oxygen started to go away and those fish started to suspend, we didn't really realize it, but 3/4 of the population of the fish in that lake basically got 5 or 6 months off. We wasn't doing nothing but running over them. Then the Alabama rig come out, and guys realized, hey man, you can just go over to Pickapoo Creek and throw the trolling motor down there an 82 foot, and just one of you fire this way and one of you fire it that way, and whenever you get to bite, the other one needs to fire it over there where he was just at. You could catch those fish that were out there that weren't molested, you know, unless by chance you just saw them come up to school. Well, now live sonar lets us fish for them always, all the time. So I personally, I have to break things down into beyond all the time. Now I will say, I'm like Greg, that if you just gave me one bait to take you and go fishing for the rest of your days, it'd be really hard for me not to pick a jig. Just because a jig, just like what he said, it works in so many situations, and it's a bait. You know, if you say, a guy says, well, I love a frog. Well, today, Jack, you ain't got to worry about him catching one. But the day in May when they're biting that frog, you can reel that jig and you still catch some. But today you can take that jig and you can drag it around and act like you're half asleep, and you might still catch you a few more. So, you know, there's certain baits that in my boat are always tied on, no matter where I go in the country. And y'all, some of y'all are going to laugh at this, but one of them for me is a Carolina rig. I still, to this day, I keep a rod in my rod locker. And I might not get it out but 3 times a year, but I keep a rod in my rod locker with an old school lead sinker. We ain't got to get complicated with no tungsten weight, no glass bead. A lead sinker or plastic bead you can get from a dollar store. A crane swivel that come off of a trout line that I got wrapped up in a trolling motor prop, and a 3/0 hook. Because there's something about that bait that always works. And when times are hard, which they have been a lot for me, that's something I can get out and feel like if I get this around something, I can catch one. So a Carolina rig for me is a year-round bait. A jig is definitely a year-round bait. And then I want something that I can just cover water with. In today's world, that's become a bladed jig. I mean, that's what everybody leans on. I've kind of gotten to where I'm more of a cranking guy. I like to crank more than throw a bladed jig, just because I feel like if I go down a bank on this lake in April and there's a real pretty top laying out there sticking off the water and I throw a bladed jig bite, I'm probably the third guy that did that today. And that, a crankbait's a little bit different, just because it's something that everybody, it's kind of like what he said about the jerkbait. It's just something that everybody is not doing every second of the day. But for me, something you need something you can cover water with, and you need something you can fish slow. And whatever those two items are, that is what your confidence is in fishing, those should be your two baits that you say, these are going to be my year-round baits.
You're talking about that Carolina rig. So I go to a tournament, and I know I need to have a Carolina rig tied on certain situation. Fish are funky. We get that on Lake Martin this time of year. When I was coming up, I threw a Carolina rig and a floating worm and a crazy shad. Yeah, that's all I knew. And the Carolina rig's still good, but we go to some of these tournaments now on tour level, and I know I need to throw it. I know I need to use it, so I rig up out of my 20 rods at the house before I leave. I've got that Carolina rig in there, and I'll go through a whole practice and a whole tournament, and for some reason I cannot make myself grab that rod out of the boat. But it's funny Cliff said that, because I know I need to do it. But just for me personally, so I've totally flipped from growing up, as I was coming up, like it was something mentally, and I've always believed, and I caught a lot of fish on it. And just somewhere along the way, I've got it in there the whole time, and it still looks just as pretty as it did when I left the house, 3 days ago. So it's just one of those things. A lot of times it's a confidence thing too. And so we get into this bait and that bait, but it seems like you get in trouble a lot of times. You got those things that you've got confidence in, and you go to first, and you can start building off of that. It's funny you mentioned that Carolina rig, because I know I need to throw it, and I just can't make myself do it. I don't know. Anybody else? I know somebody else had one a while ago. Do you have a question a while ago? Changing from the 5-fish limit to MLF. That is a good question. We get a lot too, especially on the Bass Pro Tour, and how your approach changes. I think a lot of it was the type of angler that you are. For me and my approach when I was fishing FLW Tour, Bassmaster Elite Series, when I went into a tournament, I started out with just trying to figure out how to get bit, trying to locate fish, figure out types of baits, trying to figure out the phase they were in. The time of the year I'm on a lake that I don't know that well. It's not like, when I was growing up, I had Lake Martin, Lake Jordan, Alabama River. I knew all these really good places, and I just did a milk run and hit them to catch the biggest fish I could. I knew the baits to throw for those big fish. I knew the spots those big fish set up on. But when I started going to lakes that I didn't know as much about, I just studied the lake and had to really just, in my mind, picture myself being there and the phase those fish were going to be in. And first, what type of area the fish are going to be in. What are they doing? Are they pre-spawn? Are they going to be spawning, post-spawn? Is it a fall bite? You start with all of that. But it really just started with trying to get bit. And that's kind of what I took that to the Bassmaster Elite Series. I don't have a lot of big wins because I wasn't a hero zero kind of guy. When I came into the tour, I was fishing to survive. I was fishing off my own money. I was trying to cash checks. I was just trying to survive out there. I didn't have a big stash back there to prop me up when I went out and, busted a whole season trying to get a big win. So a lot of it, was my approach. But that with the 5-fish format, once you locate fish and you figure out how to catch fish, then you can start trying to fine tune that to get those bigger bites. That's the biggest difference. In our deal, You know what the scoreable size is, and I ran into it at Smith Lake last week. I mean, I caught a bunch of fish that in my mind are decent fish, you know, but I didn't get to count them. It's 1.5 pounds minimum, you know, and any of y'all fish Smith Lake know there's a lot of big ones in there, but there's a lot of little ones too. And they're decent fish, but they weren't, you know, 1.5 pounds is a decent tournament fish. How many tournaments have you fished, 5-fish tournament, where you had 2 1/2-pounders in there and then you had 2 5s and a 4? You had a pretty dang good tournament, you know. So, but I like the intensity of the format that we're in, and I think it pushes me to my limit, my absolute limit as an angler. I've got to be able to catch fish in the morning. I got to be able to catch them in the middle of the day. I got to catch them in the afternoon, and I got to catch them on any day of the week. A lot of times in those qualifying rounds, there's 2 days in between that. You know how much stuff changes. I mean, look at the weather yesterday to today. So I like that challenge. I like the intensity, and I like knowing the score and knowing where I stand. That helps me mentally. Some guys, it has a reverse effect, but really your approach is almost the same that you had with a 5-fish limit, except for all of a sudden I know to keep scoring, I got to keep catching scoreable bass. 5-fish limit, I've got 5 fish. I got 3 good ones in there. I need to go get me a kicker. I got to do something. I got to quit messing with these little ones. Try to go get one big bite and make that 2 or 3 pound jump in my total weight that day. So you really just adapt your approach to whatever the format is to try to beat the rest of the field. But I like the excitement and intensity of what we're doing right now. My turn? Yes.
Yeah, I mean, he pretty much explained it fairly well, that the main difference with MLF is versus bass, or not necessarily versus bass, but versus any kind of a 5-fish limit deal. All I'm looking for in MLF is whatever part of the lake has the biggest population of fish. I don't care, as long as they're big enough. That's all that matters. To me, that's all practice is about, is finding fish. Trying to figure out the magic bait and all that. You might as well, that's not what practice is. Practice to me is about finding the biggest population of fish. And primarily the reason I say that is, you know, in an event that's 3 or 4 days long, you'll have weather changes, you'll have the personality of the fish may change if it's early in the year and it's warming up. So, you know, you take a lake like Gunnersville, you could find a great big old wad of fish in a ditch or in a drain, and you're catching them on a lipless bait. And 6 days from now, by the time the tournament's over, you're back there trying to catch them sight fishing. So many people, I think, in practice get too wrapped up in figuring out what a fish will bite. That's the nature of fishing. You got to figure that out every day. That's the beauty of it. That's what makes fishing a sport that, you know, I mean, I've been doing it now for 20-something years, and it's still a guess. Every time I launch my boat, it's a guess. It may be a little bit more of a knowledgeable guess sometimes, and sometimes it's not very knowledgeable, even for me. But practice, no matter whether you're fishing for 5 fish or whether you're fishing for every single fish you can catch, practice is about locating fish. Nothing more, nothing less. I see a lot of guys that we compete against now, they don't even, I mean, at the end of a practice day, I might have 42 rods out. I got some back there by the seat, some stuck under the console because the straps on the front deck won't hold them all. And I feel like those are my most ineffective days. I'm too wrapped up in trying to figure out how to catch one, and it's taking me away from trying to figure out where a whole bunch of them's at. Because no matter what, you've always got to be able to adjust. I told a guy this one time, and he said it was very well put. You know, Van Dam is, ain't nobody in this room going to argue that man is a very accomplished bass fisherman. And he's designed some really good baits and been very successful. It's pretty impressive, some of the things he's done in his career. I have all the respect in the world for him, and I don't mind being humble by saying that. But you can give Kevin Van Dam his favorite cranking rod, his 6XD crankbait. You can stand him on the diving board of a swimming pool, and he can't catch one. Brother, if you ain't around him, you cannot catch him.
Good question. We get asked that a lot. Anybody else? I know y'all had time to think about stuff. where you're fishing next. This time of year is tricky. It's a tricky time of year. Think about this time of year going into the spawn, you know, coming out of the winter, it's pre-spawn, we got weather, one day is 80 and the next day it's 20. And you got to figure out how to catch bass that day. I know y'all got stuff going through your mind. I do. We both do all the time. We're always we're always asking questions. If you're not asking why, you're not learning. You're not getting better as a fisherman. You know, I talk to like younger groups and stuff like that, and they want the magic spot and the magic bait, and that's secondary to being able to answer that question why. You know, I came from not knowing a whole lot. I mean, I was out of college before I started really getting serious about this. You know, a lot of these guys now are in college, and they know way more than I did, you know, 2 or 3 years after being on a national tour. But my whole, you know, being able to survive in this industry, being able to cash enough checks to get to live my dream has been built off of trying to answer the question why. And I get it wrong a lot. But the funny thing is by constantly doing that, I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot of what works, what doesn't work, what might work, you know. And that's why I love it. I don't know why. I mean, going on this tangent, give y'all time to think about a question, but that's why I love this sport so much. Is because it's a challenge every day. It's always changing, and it's going to push you to your limit mentally. If you're a tournament angler, physically, it's going to push you to your limit, and it gives you a chance to bounce your ideas off some friends and stuff like that. But I just, like for me personally, being a competitive person and loving sports and loving the outdoors, trying to figure out how to catch one of those green fish is just something about it that just sets me off. And it comes from trying to figure it out, trying to put that puzzle together every day. So I know y'all got questions. You got to ask them. If you're going to learn something, you got to ask me your questions. And Cliff and I are open book, and we'll share a lot of stuff, you know. And I promise you, we've asked ourselves those same questions throughout, you know, doing what we do. So
Still asking them.
go for it. We always are. So
Come on, somebody's got to have a question.
baits, line,
Let's go.
colors,
Right in the back.
electronics. Yeah. That's a good question. Has it made me better or average guys better? It's definitely both. You know, I mean, I do this sport because I like to catch fish, and I will never catch enough fish to be satisfied. I will never catch enough big fish to be satisfied. So for me personally, any tool that allows me to catch more fish and bigger fish, I'm all for it. Now, if everybody else is getting to do it, it's just going to be that much more of a challenge. And that's what we're seeing right now on tour level. You know, I was one of the first ones with Garmin when they came out with the original Panoptics. And no other electronic companies had anything where you had live sonar where you could physically watch a fish around your boat and know exactly where it was and put a bait right on their nose. And I made a lot of money, you know, until the rest of our crew got forward-facing sonar. And it was a lot of fun, and I'll be honest with you, living close to Lake Martin, I got a choice between going to Lake Jordan and catching, you know, a few big spots, you know, and working and grinding for them, and I love doing that. But dang, I love going to Lake Martin and catching 60, 75 in a day. They're not as big, but I get a couple of 2.5, 3 pounders mixed in there with them. It's just something about it. I love it. So I like it. You know, I love to sight fish. When fish are on bed, I love sight fishing. I made a lot of money doing that. It's just something I like that challenge. I like interacting with that fish that I can see. I've always liked to build. I grew up liking top water because I get to see it doing something. I get, you know, swimming a jig. I get to see fish come up here and eat it. That's 10 times better than, you know, waiting and, you know, just reeling a bait. Oh, I got one home. You know, I like them all, but getting to see that fish, and so forward sonar is kind of like sight fishing. I mean, you see that fish, you know exactly where it's at, but it doesn't guarantee that one's going to end up in your boat. And that's what we're learning on tour now is just like what I've dealt with for, you know, trying to sight fish in big tour level tournaments where you got the whole field can sight fish. the whole field can catch one if they see one. Some guys a little better at it than others, but any of them can catch them. And that's what. So we'd go into a side fishing tournament in the spring on tour, and it's a fun thing to do on the side, because I like interacting with that fish, trying to figure out how to get it to bite, how to trigger it. But when everybody can do it, it's whole lot harder, because now everybody can see them, everybody can catch them, and it just pushes you a little bit further, trying to figure out how to do it a little bit better. Like for me, Smith Lake was a frustrating week last week because I was so close to the winners, and I was pretty close to doing the right thing, but I didn't have it just right. The timing, the adjustments, knowing when to get off of a fish, something we deal with, the sight fishing, is, do I get off this fish and look for another one, or this group of fish, or this area? And I think that was, just speaking from recent experience, like at Smith last week, it would have benefited me to get away from some fish where I was getting a bite every once in a while, but they weren't actively feeding. I was trying to trigger fish that weren't feeding. And getting off of them, and if I had just moved just a little bit, there was a whole other group of fish that was the same size or bigger than what I was catching that were feeding, that I could have been way more efficient, which for our format is huge. It's all about that pace of, putting scoreable fish in the boat. So, short answer is I love it. I love it, but I hate it when everybody else gets to do it. Cliff, you got one on that?
He asked if it's made everybody better or if it's made us just us better. Technology always makes everybody better that's normally willing to learn how to apply. I think in some ways, yes. And I'm gonna give one example for that. Greg talks about we can all do it with the sight fishing, and yeah, he's right. But there has been a handful of guys in our league forever that have really, really been able to excel at catching suspended fish. And it was just a handful of them. Some of the guys that came from out west, like John Murray and Aaron, they grew up on those lakes where if you were going to catch one, that's how you caught it. And when we would go to a tournament like we had last week, when everything, it was a suspended fish game for the most part, they had a huge advantage. Well, their advantage has been taken away. As soon as we put the trolling motor on the water now, we're just as good as them. They were really good at being able to make a cast and counterbait down to a certain depth and know how deep the fish were, and et cetera, et cetera. Dude, you can just see it all now. It's simplified it. And it's simplified it for everybody. But that's what technology always does. And no different whenever guys started getting bass boats that would run 70 and everybody else had a bass boat that would run 40. Did the guy that had a bass boat that runs 70 have an advantage? Absolutely. Until everybody else had one that ran 70. And then his advantage was gone. The same thing with a sonar. It's the same thing with everything else. It's the same thing going back all the way back to when they told D. Thomas he couldn't use a 10-foot flipping stick. And he cut 2 foot off of it and he still beat him. It's the same, and now we're all forced to fish with an 8-foot rod because of that simple, stupid point in history, because some guys got mad because they couldn't flip. Technology somewhat always evens the curve once everybody has it. Yes, you're absolutely right.
What's the limit, or how many batteries to run it? I've done a little bit of both in recent years. I like the lithiums just because they're more efficient. They last longer. They're lighter. I don't have all that weight in the back of the boat. I got a discount. I'm trying to get 3 years out of them because they cost so much. That's the biggest thing. Lithium's definitely the best option for that, just for a variety of reasons. It's just they cost so dang much. So you just have to mentally make that decision which one's more cost effective. I get a lithium battery, it's got a warranty on it for 10 years, or I can get a AGM lead acid's got a warranty for 3 years. You know, figure out how much you're fishing, how many cycles that battery can go through. But overall, yeah, for sure. A lot of us have gone through that on setting up your boat to run all these electronics, live scope, you know, hydrowave, power poles use a lot. There's two things, you know, if you're doing your cranking batteries, you rig them parallel, so you can go with two 12-volt batteries. That way you're boosting your reserve capacity, but you're not increasing your voltage per se. So you're just getting more life out of that battery. The trolling motor battery is different. You go 36 volts, they're rigged perpendicular, so you're building voltage all the way up. You know, it's 12 times 3 gives you 36 volts with 3 batteries. Right now, I've got 2 AGMs for my cranking because Mercury recommended that we should go with the AGMs for cranking. Now, I think that's probably they're gonna maybe change course. I think they're worried about the alternator and charger. So that's something that I'm looking at right now. The last 3 years, I've run lithium for cranking and had no problems. No problems with the battery, no problems with the motor. So that's kind of where I'm at. What brand? I've used Lithium Pros. Was the first lithium battery I ever used. I've used Relions. Looking at some other options as we speak. So that's the only way I know how to put it. AGMs, I use the interstates, big interstates, because I got buddies who got an interstate distributorship. I know if I need a battery, I can run down. He doesn't give them to me, I have to pay for them, but it's a good battery, good dependable battery. That's a big black 31 series. That's a great battery. It's heavy, that's a heavy sucker. You know, I know but a lot of our boats now, like Phoenix is designing the boats for, to have 5 big AGMs in the back for that weight. You know, the balance of that boat and how it runs, how it fishes. Pretty much all the companies, sure Skeeter does the same thing. You know, they're factoring that into their boat build to have that much weight right there. And I didn't, if you think that doesn't matter, we learned the hard way when we started loading tackle in the boat. You get too much of the wrong stuff in the wrong spot and your boat just drops, 3 miles per hour. So it's, they're building them for that. And I thought I'd have a whole lot faster boat because I went to lithiums, 0.5 mile per hour tops, that I gained in speed. Big difference in weight, but it has to do with how that boat's built and how it's loaded. So I'm not buying them for the speed, I'm buying them for the efficiency overall. Maybe better gas mileage, just by not pushing that much weight around.
So I'm running lead batteries. I run AGMs. I run a 31M series Odyssey, and I'm running 4 units. But I'm also running a power pole charge. And I think if you're having an issue with, no matter what, if you're running that much equipment, if you're running the amount of equipment that we're running, you need to turn off what you can. If you'll take the 2 seconds it takes to put your console units in sleep mode before you go up on the front deck and fish. Honestly, these units are not pulling as much as what you think they are. A lot of guys that I know that are having trouble with, their batteries, it's just because they're not taking care of their equipment throughout the day like they need to be. If you know that, 'cause, any motor, Mercury or Yamaha, is going to have an alternator on it, and it's going to charge. And the motor companies, I know Yamaha, they just increased their alternator in the new SHO. It's a lot bigger, has a lot more output to help combat exactly what you're saying than what we had in the past. But lithium or lead, AGM, either one will work. There's people that are making them both work, no doubt. I do agree that lithium does have the benefits of lightweight, as well as, honestly, you can buy, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you can buy just a 1 battery lithium that's 36 volts. So if you're in a smaller boat, if you're in a 19-foot boat and you want a 36-volt trolling motor, there's a good chance that lithium is the way to go. And now, some friends of mine at home, they're running an AGM cranking battery, and because of exactly what Greg said, because some of your motor manufacturers have asked to, not run lithium on your cranking batteries. So they're running an AGM cranking battery, and then they're running a 36-volt trolling motor battery. So they've got space now back there. And they're taking and putting, say, either for your cranking battery, if you got to run an AGM, it needs to be a 31. There's a huge difference. Don't go to AutoZone and buy a 27 series battery. It will not. It might work for a month, but it will not run everything that's on these boats. But a 31 will. But if you're going to run 5 units and run your live wells all day and you don't want to turn them off and all that, the next thing you need to probably consider doing is just get you a 31 series lithium battery, or clear you out a spot in your rod locker or your passenger, your driver's side rod locker, something like that, and put you a 12-volt lithium that you can charge and run your electronics off of just that. There are a lot of guys I know at home are doing that. They're actually, so the typical bass boat setup has always been cranking battery, 3 trolling motor batteries, or 2 trolling motor batteries, depending on if you had a 24 or 30-volt system. Well, now that you can get one battery that's a 36 volt, you've got 2 or 1 complete spare tray back there. So it's possible now for you to just buy an AGM that does nothing but crank your boat. And then you can buy a 36 volt lithium, that's just one battery. And now you have room if you want to put another AGM, or if you want to put another lithium that's smaller, and let all your electronics and paraphernalia run off of it. But the one thing out of all that has helped me with mine the most is the way these boats are rigged. When you put your electronics in your boat, if you're going to run the amount of electronics that we're running, and I'm going to say this, and Skeeter might get mad at me, do not use the factory wiring that is in that boat. I don't know about every boat brand that's out there, but the vast majority of these boat brands' wiring harnesses is not as big as it needs to be. Go buy you some size 10 or bigger, 8 is what I use, some 8.2 Romex, and run you a direct feed of 8.2 Romex from the back of your boat to the front of your boat, run another one from the back of your boat to the console, put them on a Perco breaker switch, and put your electronics on that. Those electronics will burn half the amount of voltage out of your battery pulling it through that bigger wire than what they will pulling it out of that wiring harness. There's a very good chance that you can fix the problems that you're having with your boat by simply pulling a bigger piece of wire.
Talking, that C-Clear harness, you hear a lot about it. That's basically what it does. It gives you stronger voltage, coming off the cranking batteries, leading up to your units. But
yeah, you want to make sure that you're not losing your voltage in your wiring.
Yeah.
And that I've struggled with this with my friends at home and tried to explain it to them and tried to explain it to them and tried to explain it to them, and you just about got to show them. But if you're having trouble if you feel like you've got an adequate battery in your boat and you're having trouble with it staying charged all day, pull you some bigger wire and just see what it does. I think you might really be shocked how much it helps. Make sure if you do that, make sure that you put some kind of a breaker switch on that wire. Don't wire it direct where it just stays hot all the time. Because if you've ever got your charger plugged in, your house gets struck by lightning, you just bought you about 10 grand worth of electronics. So if you pull a direct wire, if any of y'all in here take my recommendation, do not do what I'm telling you to do without installing a on-off breaker switch in the negative lead. And it's simple to do. You just get a simple on-off. Perco is the company that makes the one I use. Simple on-off, and all you do is just take your negative, cut it, put the two that go to the battery on one side, the two that go to the front on the other side, and mount it back there under your back lid where you can just simply turn it off, turn it on. But you've got to have that. Do not let your electronics stay to where they're just hooked to a battery all the time. Yeah, I cut the black wire. You could cut either, it wouldn't matter. Just make sure whatever you do for one, you do for the other. All right, who's next? What's that now?
Turn your summer off when you're fishing.
Yeah, all I do, I don't ever fish on the front deck of my boat with my console units running. But I don't turn them off. I just put them in sleep mode. If you put them in sleep mode in Garmin, it stalls everything out. And then when you get ready to move, if you touch any button on the screen, they instantly come back on. So there's not a lot of downtime. I don't know how Humminbird works or how Low Ranch works, or I mean, and I think we both were in Garmin, so we probably can only tell you about Garmin. But for Garmin, all you have to do is touch the power button, and a chart pops up, and it just says, it gives you options to turn a unit off or to sleep the unit, and you just touch sleep unit, and that's it. And I do that really and truly. I don't know that if you have your units wired like I'm talking about wiring them, all that interference is pretty much gone. 90% of the interference you have in electronics is from your boat. It's not that you got a bad depth finder. It's your boat. And it's not that your depth finder's settings. I have people message me on social media every other day. Man, I'm getting a live scope. How do I set it up? It's pretty simple. Run some power to it, turn it on. Done. It's really, I mean, there's no magic number for me. If you turn it on and you've got a whole bunch of interference, it's getting that from a source. That interference is coming from somewhere. And a lot of times, say, you just take this boat right here. Okay, if you've got power that is in this boat in a form of a harness, which is what this boat's built with, it's got your running lights in it, it's got your live well pumps on it, it's got your interior lights, it's got everything in this boat that's electrical is in that. And they do offer you little quick connects under the console. The manufacturers will leave those. If you plug your electronics into that, they're connected to everything else in this boat. So when you turn those electronics on, they might be working. And your partner catches one, turns a live well on, now your electronic looks like it's fuzzy. It's not the electronics' fault, and it's not that you need to fix it. There's no magic buttons to push on it. It's getting interference from your boat. So by wiring them like I was talking about a while ago, where you run your own independent wiring, you're eliminating it. It's very important. And he's right, there's a company now, what's it called?
See clear.
Yeah, there's a company now that's making a harness that's designed just for electronics. But I've been doing the same thing they're doing for 10 years with insulated Romex from Lowe's. It works. But, you know, it's a lot of the questions that you have about the pinging and why is one affecting the other, or is it affecting this or affecting that, a lot of times that's in the electrical part of your boat, not in your units.
Like when we're fishing,
you know,
how much you cut it on and off?
I don't know that it really does. I will say that that's one really cool thing that I've learned about this live scope deal. No, not that it don't matter, but that you can see what they do. You can see one sitting over there in the end on a dock post, and you'll be surprised. Have you ever used live scope? It's pretty incredible how many fish, dude, they know we're the boogeyman. I mean, they got us figured out better than we got them figured out. You'll go over there and think, look, there's one on that pole right there, I'm gonna catch him. And he's 7, 8 foot deep. You skip your wacky worm over, it goes make a perfect little cast, and he just lands right up there. It sinks about a foot, and that fish goes shoo. No, we done done this before. So for me, if I start running into that's one of the beautiful things to me about live scope. It's made me a better fisherman. It's not so much that I can see a fish out there over 80 foot of water and throw my bait over and catch it. Don't get me wrong, that's really cool, and I have never been able to do that in my lifetime without live scope. But the awesome thing about live scope to me is I can see how those fish react to my bait. If I'm throwing a jerkbait and 7 or 8 of them swim up off the bottom and look at it and don't get it, I know I'm doing something wrong. It's either a color thing, action thing, a depth thing, or something. I got to change something. So to answer your question, based on the ping deal, if I see them fish acting like really skittish, yeah, man, I'll turn it all off. Absolutely, in a heartbeat. Even the live scope. You know, if I'm fishing targets, like the one I'm talking about that's on the corner of that dock, and I know I'm going to fish these 20 docks on this bank, I don't necessarily have to have it. If I feel like that those fish are pushing off and acting goofy, and a lot of times, you know, now you can see what they're doing, then yeah, man, turn it off. But let them tell you.
I used to have that rule about if I'm in shallow water, I wanted to have it on any other time. If I was in shallow water, I felt like I was closer to the fish. They're a little more spooky, you know, that kind of thing. But now it's a harder decision because of forward sonar, because I can see them in shallow water too a lot of times. If it's dense cover, grass, trees, stuff like that. But like Cliff said, one thing I learned, like I fish Lake Martin all the time for fun. That's where I grew up. I like messing with those deep ones. Until I got live scope, I didn't realize how many fish were coming to me. That's the thing that has blown my mind. You know, messing around down there more than anywhere else with it, was like he said, they know you're there. When you pull up, they know you're there. And these fish have adapted to their, you know, surroundings, their conditions. When I learned with live scope, I always thought I was trolling around and I was going over to fish around the spot. When I got live scope, I realized I pulled up on a spot and they were coming to me. And I don't know why. You know, I have my own theory. I think they think that shadow coming off the boat is a ball of bait over their head. That's my theory. You know, talking about trying to answer why. I may be wrong, I may be right, but that's what I learned with live scope is, and I think that clicking coming off of my trolling motor head, because I didn't have my hydro wave on, but I watched them swim up to my trolling motor head. Well, maybe it was the turbulence coming off of the prop. So it depends. So there's times like when I'm messing around on Lake Martin, I want everything on because they're coming. Now after you catch 3 or 4 and they realize, okay, that ain't what I thought it was, you got to go find you another group. You know, you learn to do that. But I still try to, if I'm in I did this last year. I was at Harris Chain. I had a good tournament. I was in this little canal, and I felt like I'd spent a week in this little canal the size about where we are right here, you know, because the fish were coming in there. I knew they were there. And after you fish it a while, you know everything in there that you're going to throw at, and you're just trying to just kind of blend in, you know. In that situation, I thought it was good that I just disabled all my sonar, because I knew everything in there. I knew the fish were in there. I just didn't want anything I just wanted to blend in. But that was kind of a unique situation because not many of us just going to be sitting real still. I know Mark Daniels Jr. probably would have won Lake Fork a couple of years ago when we were there. We changed lakes. But he had it dialed in better than anybody on Fork that week. In a similar situation. He was in a real small, confined area. The fish were coming to him. He knew it really well. He thought it was really important to, power poles down, eliminate any noise, try not to be moving around the boat. But it's a pretty unique situation for most of us, especially how we fish around here. So I'd say most of the time I leave it on because I feel like I'm gonna see a few more fish because I got my sonar running. Yes, sir. Yeah.
I'm going to answer that like it was answered to me, because I feel I grew up with a flasher too, whether you believe it or not. If you want to compete with the trends, you've got to spend the time to learn them. You've got the exact same opportunity as that man that come out of college. There is so much information out there right now. I promise you, if you want to learn how to use a live scope, there's a million videos on YouTube. You could be a live scope expert in a week if you want to invest the time. And that was what, whenever, because I kind of have some of the same feeling that you have about it. I agree, and it's our sports, just like everything else in this world, it's evolving, and you've got to evolve with it, or be satisfied to not be as up to date as the ones who do, and that's frustrating sometimes. It's frustrating. I remember when LiveScope first came out. I'm gonna tell this story on Mark Davis. He's a good friend of mine. And when LiveScope first come out, Mark Davis lives on Lake Washita up in Arkansas. And Mark has fished that lake since he was this big, just like I'm sure you have these lakes. And Mark knows, well, this point over here, it's got 3 stumps on the left side of it. There ain't none on the right-hand side. And this little hump out here, there's one piece of brush over here off his southeast corner. And he knows it's there because he put it there. And he knows that lake as good as anybody could know it. And I was at his house for a week between tournaments, and we went fishing on Washita, and we had been going, and he'd been going in his boat, and I'd been going in mine. We'd fish till dinner and go eat lunch and then piddle around. Well, one day he decided we would just go together, and he got in my boat. We're on his home lake. I mean, what are you going to do? I'd look at him and say, where do you want to go? Oh, we go off down through here, and we're running down through there, and he touched me on the shoulder and said, stop right here. So we stop, and I put my trolling motor over. And I said, look yonder, there's a brush pile right there. Catch one. Mark says, what the heck? And he said, how'd you know it was us? I said, I could see it. So he said, okay. So we went off down through here and went to another spot. I said, look, there's a big old boulder right there. There's 3 of them sitting on it. Catch another. In about 2 hours, Mark Davis he was about to have a complete mental breakdown because he realized that I was learning that lake in a course of time where it took him 20 years to learn it. I was learning it in minutes. If you don't want to get beat by that, you've got to learn it. You've got to learn. It's just that simple. Now that's changed with everything. I grew up in the Louisiana Delta, and I can tell you right now, live scope in the Louisiana Delta is worth about a nickel. Live scope, when you're flipping hyacinths, and a deep one is 17 inches, live scope is not very useful. Live scope is totally purposeless. But I remember when GPS first came out, and I spent my entire childhood, learning how to, back then gas was 75 cents a gallon when I was 18 years old. You could afford to run 105 miles each direction in a tournament if you knew you could fish for 11 minutes and catch 22 pounds and go back to the boat ramp. Second place was going to be 10. And that's what we did. So we spent all that time learning, not necessarily about fishing, but how to navigate. What was the best, fastest way. And we did this it's kind of like you talking about that flasher. I did this with a flasher, and the flasher's still the best in the world for running. The flasher beats any sonar that's made in today's world for running shallow water because it's instantaneous. If you don't want to run on a sandbar running up this river, you get you a flasher. Because it won't just that current 2D sonar, when you go from 17 foot to 1 foot, you're stuck before you realize it. That flasher don't do that. It don't lie. That sun gun's coming back around. And when it gets to about 5, you better lost the gas. All of us old guys that have ran a flasher know that. We know, everybody here knows what I'm talking about. But we spent all that time with paper maps rolled up like a newspaper, running, looking at that flasher, trying to piece our way through all that. And not only that, but trying to figure out how to get into stuff. And 10 years ago when GPS came out, in 2 years' time, I lost every fishing hole I had on Louisiana Delta. Every single one of them, no matter how hard to get to, were public knowledge.
Satellite imagery.
Every single one. And that's what LiveScope is doing now. So whether you love it, hate it, it's here to stay. And there's something else coming. I have no idea what's next, but there's somebody right now somewhere figuring up something that's going to be another deal. Now, honestly, I really feel like the people that it's unfair for is the fish. Man, our poor fish don't ever get a break no more. And I think that's why, fishing has gotten so much harder than what it used to be because of the fact that these fish don't ever get a break. But I will promise you that if you want to learn how to use LiveScope, don't feel like your age prevents you from that. It's very simple, and there's so much information about it out there right now that it's crazy. It's just a matter of desire and want to. And that's really what it boils down to. And it took me, I fought it longer. I was probably one of the last guys on tour to have it. And when I got it, I was like, well, I'm a retard. It was that simple. We went to some of them tournaments. I remember we went to a tournament up north. It was a smallmouth tournament. Man, it's like you weren't even in the tournament without it. And once I got it, I realized why. But at the same time, I can go home tomorrow and go fishing in the marsh. And the only purpose of turning it on is if you want to try to kill your battery. So it doesn't necessarily apply to everything, and you still got to have the knowledge that you got on how to make them bite. Just because you can see them does not mean you can catch them. I think I agree with what you're saying, but I will tell you this. I do think that, and this goes back to his question, honestly, I feel like that the electronics that we have now, the technology has came much farther than what it was. That a lot of the issues that we used to have with pinging and things like that, I don't think the electronics we have now produce the amount of disturbance that what we had 7, 8 years ago did. It's just like a cell phone. The cell phone has went from, being where you can barely hold it with one hand. Now you can get one out the size of a pack of matches. It's the same thing with our electronics on our boat. I don't think that the disturbance that they create is as much as they once were either.
That's it. One thing I thought, that's good stuff from Cliff. I couldn't even touch that. One thing I thought about is a lot of people that still hunt with a traditional bow or compound bow, when you go buy you a 7 mag or a scope, you can shoot them out there.
Or a crossbow.
500-600 yards. So you gotta think about what you're trying to get out of fishing. If you're fishing tournaments and you got guys using LiveScope, and that's the deal that's going on like we were at Smith, you're just trying to make it hard on yourself if you don't. Or you're trying to do something so different that that maybe they haven't been pressured like that. But if you're going out just to have a good time and you get a lot of satisfaction out of doing it the hard way, just like a Major League Baseball player swinging a wooden bat instead of an aluminum bat, everybody, they know they hit a home run with that wood bat, not that aluminum one. They get a lot of satisfaction out of that. And I can see that having some value too. Just depends on where you're coming from as an angler, what you're trying to get out of the sport.
All right, the man says we're out of time. Has anybody got any more questions? I don't want to leave anybody out. Yes, ma'am. What's your question? The biggest fish I ever caught. Fish or bass? Does it matter? Just fish? Well, I live on the edge of the Gulf of Mexico, so I get to fish in the ocean a pretty good bit. And I've caught some fish out there that'll weigh, a couple 100 pounds, sharks and stuff like that. So those are probably some of I've caught fish that were bigger than me, but I don't know exactly what they weigh. So we'll just say 250, just for easy math.
Big old boy. Biggest fish, like Cliff, it was a yellowfin tuna, about 100 miles out off of the beach, off the shore. Can't see land anywhere around you, but you see these giant fish out there. They're actually eating flying fish. I know Cliff knows what I'm talking about. But if you're a bass fisherman and you like schooling fish, and we went about 100 miles offshore and we pulled out there and he's like, if you'll pay for the gas to get there, we're gonna catch them. This is before we ever left the dock. And we got out there, and I didn't see nothing for miles, about to get seasick, and we pulled out there, and all of a sudden I see something scooting across the top of the water, and there's a flying fish. You know, they're about that big, look like a bat, but there's fish. And I watched him, and he flew about 20 yards in the air, and when he hit the water, it looked like a bomb went off. And that was one of those yellowfin tuna that came up there and ate him. So needless to say, that was the day I caught the biggest fish I'd ever caught. I think he was about 90 pounds, 100 pounds tuna, and I didn't want to catch two. One was enough. I was tired. So, but the biggest bass I've ever caught weighed 10 pounds and 5 ounces. And I got to see it all happen, and that was awesome. It's a good question.
Thank y'all, everybody. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Cliff. Thank you, Greg. We appreciate y'all coming and hanging out. Guys, they're going to be hanging out for a little while longer. If y'all got any questions for them, y'all stop them. They're more than happy to talk to y'all, sign anything y'all want signed. I think Greg's got some cards with him. Got his pretty face on them. But right now, we're going to get into giving some more stuff away. So y'all get your tickets ready, and we're going to start going through some of these door prizes. Gentry, what you want to give away? You want to do Seaguar? Yeah. All right. So what we've got from Seaguar, they have sent us to give away. We have a couple different things. We've got a bunch of hats. We've got some hats with a spool of 12-pound line, and we've got a set of 3, 15, 17, and 12, right? All 100% fluorocarbon. Spin this thing up real good. First ticket, 429203. 429203. Anybody? Anybody? All right, moving on. Red ticket 142073. 142073. Moving on to the next one, 107398. 107398. Anybody? Nope. One zero seven one nine four. 107194. You just gonna start keeping it all? Going once. Last 3, 194 on the ticket. Gotta be present to win. 107340. There he is. Blue ticket 825305. 825305. 825305. Nope. One zero 107249. There he is. Man, it's got a string of tickets. Looks like a streamer. Y'all are at an unfair advantage here. 107291. Jeremy, what'd you do? Buy a boat today?
3 of them. Put them all in your name.
We'll make this fair. Mary brought more tickets. We'll shuffle them up again. Alrighty. Blue ticket 825-316. 825-316. Nobody? Four 29277. 429277. That's a blue ticket. Nope. 429288, another blue ticket. I wish y'all could see it from where I see it, because these two men down here just had the look of heartbreak all over their faces. Did you get it? How close were you? Down?
All right, guys. I'm gonna keep the live stream going. We're gonna have some kayak guys come up here next. A couple of the guys that have been fishing the national kayak tour, KBF, Hobie. So if you are into some kayak fishing, definitely stay on. And of course, just fishing in general, these guys know how to catch them. I'm sure they'll give us some good tips and pointers. But I am going to throw you on mute unless you want to listen to tickets being called out. But I'm going to throw you on mute, and we'll be back in just a few.
429254, blue ticket.
All right, guys. 1:15. We are going to get the guys, the kayak panel up. 3 guys that have been fishing the national kayak scene, so I think they've got a lot of knowledge, and should be good discussion. So hopefully you want to stick around. 1:15. That's the goal. 1:15. We'll try to get started again. All right. So see, I'm going to mute you again, and go refresh your beverage. Take care of whatever you need to. Testing. Sorry, guys, we only have 2 mics. Well, the people on the internet need to hear you. So, well, guys, apparently everybody just wanted to listen to Glitter Boat guys talk, so we're getting rolling with some guys that have been fishing in the National Kayak Series. Maybe some of you might want to consider they're paying out some pretty big dollars these days. So come join us. We'll do the standard Q&A thing. I would also throw out there, don't forget, just because they fish out of kayaks doesn't mean they don't know how to catch fish, period. Yes. So we'll let them get into some of that kind of stuff. So it's not just about kayaks. One thing real quick, for those of you on the internet and anybody that is into the kayak fishing stuff around here, we are actually getting ready to roll out a monthly online kayak tournament. Not trying to do anything huge, just something to build some community around, but we're going to be doing a $25 buy-in. It'll be the 1st through the 20th of each month. You can get online and fish any day of the month. So that's going to be more information coming out on that here. Look for that next week. So without further ado, I'm going to let these guys talk some about what's going on in the kayak world and this crazy thing of getting in plastic boats and going all over the country. I think y'all have hit some pretty icy spots as well. So why don't y'all take a quick second and introduce yourselves. Michael, start with you down there.
All right, my name is Michael Putman. I started kayak fishing about 5 years ago. I actually busted a hole in my fiberglass boat and needed to make a change. So picked up a kayak, slid it into the closest place I could find, and started catching fish. One of the probably cool things was this little month-long tournament that he was talking about. That's a great way to get into a kayak tournament, figure out how to do it. No one's around. There's no big blast off or weigh in or anything like that. It's a pretty smooth way to learn how to kayak fish for sure.
I'm Joe Mcelroy. I live in Coleman, Alabama. Born and raised in Gadsden, Alabama. Grew up fishing on the Coosa River here, Henry Neely. And I started kayak fishing in 2019. Again, I've been a bass fisherman out of glitter boats for a long time, fishing the Alabama Bass Trail since it started. Lots of local clubs and so forth. And while at the Classic in Knoxville, I watched some fellows catching fish out of kayaks. And I thought, I'm getting old. I need some exercise. I'm going to look into this kayak fishing business. And so my search started. I found a Hobie. And bought my first Hobie in June 2019. And again, I knew nothing about fishing out of a kayak competitively. So there were a couple of national trails. The KBF seemed to be the one that everyone was either cutting their teeth on or fishing, on pro tour type levels. So I started with KBF fishing monthly tournaments. They had some regional tournaments as well that I participated in. And I just started little by little gaining a lot of respect for the sport. My wife was instrumental in that as well because she has a very tender heart. And during spring, when the females were on bed, she would always give me pure Hades over taking that bass back to the weigh-in in a big boat. And then putting her in a tank and then her being released wherever they do it. So by catching release, it gave me a little more comfort at home. I didn't get ridiculed as much as I used to. So kayak fishing to me is a growing passion, and the sport has grown immensely. And again, I'm proud to be on the Hobie fishing team and being a part of the Bucks Island family, and look forward to many successful years ahead of us.
My name is Lance McWhorter. I'm from Tyler, Texas. It's kind of right in between Shreveport, Louisiana and Dallas. I'm on the Jackson Kayak Pro Fishing team, and I tour around and compete in Bassmaster Bass Nation Kayak Series, Hobie Bass Open Series, as well as the KBF Pro Series and Trail Series. I've been kayak fishing for, it's about 10 years now, and started competitively last year, and just really have loved the experience of getting into competition, and at the stage of where like Joe was just saying, where the sport's growing at such a level that it's really given everybody kind of the same playing field as a lot of the guys in the higher end boat leagues are getting. So right now, if you're really looking into competitive fishing, you really enjoy going out and learning how to break down water, and that's what I whispered into Michael's ear when people, when the boat guys are walking off, when the boat guys are done. We're the ones that'll teach you how to break down water. It's, you know, we don't have the opportunity to run 60 miles if our bite's not on. If the front moved in and some rain washed out our fishing area, we go in there, we really break down the water. We have the ability to run 4, 5, 6 miles, but we don't always have the time. So that's been probably my favorite thing coming from boat angling is, you know, getting around some of these guys and learning how to break down water, learning how to really find fish and stay on them. And where I live, you know, I live right next to Lake Fork and Palestine and Rayburn and Caddo and a lot of really legendary bass lakes. My favorite thing to do on a derby day is to roll in a cove behind a couple of glitter boat guys and, you know, start pulling 4 and 5 pounders out behind them and watching their eyes get big at the guy in the plastic boat, you know, surprised that it didn't tip over. So it's one of those things, if you really want to learn how to fish, get a boat and go do it. You know, it's stealthy, it's fun, you're right down by the water, you're right by the action, and it'll just really change your whole outlook on fishing.
You got any questions? I know I'm looking at you too.
Oh, was that you watching the live stream with us yesterday? All right, yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Well, so, I mean, I guess I'd say go into a little bit more in depth of the difference in coming from the big boat to, since all you guys have fished big boats. And again, it's not one or the other, especially your Bucks Island, we want you to buy both.
Yeah.
That's our preference. But you know, the stability issue, that seems to be one of the biggest questions that I get asked, is are they stable and how on earth do you spend that many hours on the water? You know, where are we at?
I mean, stability-wise, I always tell people it's not your grandpa's canoe. You know, most people think of canoes and they hit that tip point and over you go. You guys that were watching the live stream yesterday, with my motor going or whether I'm just standing still, I can stand up in that boat. I'm 5'11", 220 pounds, broken down military, bad back, bad knees, bad everything, and I can stand up and flip and punch heavy grass and get around no problem. So being a boat guy too, I love the exploration that I can do in a kayak and being able to get back into places that most guys can't get into, or you know, killing the electronics and sneaking in and, you know, just kind of going real stealth mode in a heavily pressured lake, you know, like Fork or something like that. It really makes a difference.
I tend to agree with that. Also, being a vet, having jumped out of about 1,500 airplanes, the ground took its toll on my body over the years, but getting in the kayak, I'm 259 pounds, 5'10". I was a little concerned about the stability as well. I fish out of a Hobie PA-14 with a 360 Mirage drive. And again, when I first got into the kayaking, I wanted to do it for exercise, but what I learned quickly in getting into the competitive side of it, if you don't have an electric motor, if you don't have advanced electronics, side imaging, down scan, and active target forward imaging has changed the landscape of not only glitter boat, as we refer to them, but it changed the way we kayak fish. If you don't have active target, you're not going to be competing with the top level kayak anglers in the future. Some people say it's cheating. Well, I think it's just another tool that you put into play. And catching fish out of a kayak, when they bite right at the side, they will give you a lot of it. It's like stepping on a covey of quail. If any of you have ever done that, you know what that feeling's like. It's right there at the boat, and it's so exhilarating. And landing a fish in a kayak is different than a big boat because, again, you're right there in their face. So kayak fishing opens up a whole nother world. There's water that you can get to that a big boat could never get to. And those fish are unpressured, and those fish are a lot easier to catch for the most part.
So I'd go back to the stability thing for a minute and just point out that every area has a local kayak club, and those clubs are going to put on demo days or little tournaments that we call throwdowns. The community is very tight, and they will let you test their boat, take it out for a day, try it out, see how you like it. One of the biggest pieces of advice I can give is to go to one of those demo days and start on one end of the line and go down and find which boat you like, which boat you're the most comfortable in, and just test them out. Like I said, the local clubs, there's North Alabama Kayak Anglers, they're in North Alabama. There's Coleman Kayak Anglers, are the kind of, Coleman County, a little bit further south, Iron City, Coosa River. There's just a ton of clubs, and all of these guys will let you test their boats out and find what you're comfortable in. And as soon as you find what you're comfortable in, you'll be standing up, just like Lance said, standing, flipping, pitching, throwing a frog, throwing a jerkbait. There's nothing that you can't do in a kayak as soon as you learn to be comfortable in it.
All right. Bring up any questions.
What type of baits? Everything that you use on a boat, we have on there. If you go look at we've got our boats down there at the bottom, kind of rigged out. You can see all the tackle boxes that we have on there and all the storage. We carry just about everything that you find on a boat. There'd be worms and frogs and spinner baits and buzz baits and the works. On average, during practice, I'll carry 5 or 6 tackle boxes, and in competition, you whittle it down to just a few. A lot. I mean, specific colors are, just like boats. You kind of go off of the water conditions. You go off of it if it's muddy or if it's clear, if it's super clear, just if you can see it maybe 8 inches or a foot. So it all just really changes, and it changes from lake to lake. And that's one of the funnest parts, especially with kayak fishing, is you get to travel around the whole country and fish all these different bodies of water. Where I'm from Texas, so my lakes are completely different than the lakes that you have here, the lakes that I was just at in South Carolina last week, or Florida a few weeks ago. So you get to go and experience all those different ones, and it really teaches you to learn what colors to pick out.
So for our 2 Alabama boys, why don't you kind of jump into the lakes around here and what you go to?
So I'm an old school guy, even though I may not be that far into fishing. If it's not green pumpkin or chartreuse and white, I don't really throw it. Let's just put it out there. Green pumpkin's my favorite color. Chartreuse and white, if I'm throwing a spinnerbait or something like that, those would be my go-tos.
Well, I tend to agree. Green pumpkin's a go-to for me, and in Alabama, I throw a white fluke a lot. I was on Smith Lake this past week with the MLF tournament. I was actually out taking pictures of a couple of our local anglers, Matt Lee and Jordan Lee, 2 kids that kind of grew up tournament fishing against me and with me in Coleman. And I watched them all week fishing and catching fish on jerk baits and shaky heads, and which are pretty popular this time of year. And after the second period on this Sunday, I took a couple of friends and we went throwing flukes on a bluff wall, and we caught 35 spots in about an hour and a half. And no one that was fishing the MLF were throwing flukes.
Offshore?
Yeah, so especially when you get into something with pedals or even a motor, the technology's there that you can be as advanced as you want. Kayaks have spot lock on them now. You can sit on a ledge or a hump or anything just like you can in a boat. You learn in a kayak as a boat, some certain boats will get a little closer than what, maybe they should or you're comfortable with. You'll learn how to turn your boat into the wave and take it just like if you were anywhere else. So the offshore is just a part of the game. There's big fish there, so you're going to find a way to go sit on them. And it's really not that bad at all.
I'd like to add to that, there are certain conditions that you don't want to be on open water. Any winds that are over 10 knots, I think you're taking some risk. I've seen a lot of people try it. I've tried it, and I've prayed about every stroke to get back to base. It can be very dangerous, so you have to be smart about when you launch, knowing what the weather conditions are, so that you don't get caught in a situation. I recently fished Toledo Bend last month, and when I started back in, the winds were blowing out of the north of about 25, and I was facing 4+ rollers. And I made 2 attempts to get out and cross a 500-yard bay and was turned back by the wind. My plan B was to spend the night there, which was not a good thing, because it was very cold. So you want to be careful, plan your ventures so that you take advantage of good wind conditions. And the kayaks today are more stable, but they are not. They're not guaranteed to stay upright. So be careful. Make sure you have dry clothes in the compartment just in case you get rolled over.
Totally agree with that, and I was going to use Toledo Bend as the example. That was rough conditions, and it was pretty sketchy there for a little bit. And it was Hobie Bass Open Series, which is human powered only, so you could only use pedals or paddle. We couldn't use our motors. My spot was a main lake point, about 35 feet of water that I was drop shotting on, and I thought I could get out there real quick. It was about a 2.5 mile run in the morning, and get set up and get back before the wind kicked up. And I got out there, and like Joe said, 4-foot rollers, pushing 30-mile-an-hour winds, and it was clipping, and it was sketchy. There was several guys out there, very advanced kayak anglers, that did flip their boats when they would get close to shore, not offshore. But it's like Joe said, it's really about knowing your boat, knowing your equipment, knowing your abilities. I have friends that go offshore and catch marlin out of kayaks. They're down in Panama, catching blue marlin and big rooster fish, and out in the waves in the Gulf, out by the oil rigs. So they're super stable, But it's common sense prevails, though. You're in a small boat. I've been out there in tournaments where the boat tournaments have canceled when we're out there by. I think they canceled the boat tournament that day. But it was. Just common sense prevails. Be safe. It is a small boat. They are stable. They are safe, but just sometimes you have to let common sense prevail. The best fight? Oh man, probably when you get into like accidentally get a big catfish or a big striper or something like that. But I mean, you hook a good 7-8 pound bass, and I mean, you're in a fight. It'll pull you around pretty easy.
Yeah, so I caught a 11.5 pound, 26 inch long largemouth in my first kayak. It was pedal boat, didn't have anything in it, a couple rods and a tackle box, and it took me about 9 minutes, and he pulled me 200 yards from where I hooked him. So it's fun.
The catfish will tow you around, especially on this lake. I've caught them on jigs here before, and I was at Greensport Marina. If any of you locals know where I'm talking about, I was fishing a roadbed, dragging a jig across that roadbed, and thumped it, set the hook, and it was an hour and 10 minutes before I could get my jig back. And you knew what it was because the way the line would go. There was no turning that fish. But stripers will do the same thing. I was fishing the Bassmaster National Championship last week in South Carolina. I was throwing an A-rig under a bridge, which I hate to do. I hate A-rigs, but I needed to throw it. And I threw it under the bridge, let it go down about 15 feet, started my retrieve, and then it hit. A striper grabbed my $40 A-rig, my $37 braid, and never slowed down. So he spooled me, and there I was looking at a rod and reel that my good friend Jordan Lee had given me that was naked, had no line on it. So it happens, but the excitement of fishing that close to the fish is something you can't really explain. You have to experience it. I think one thing, unless you guys have an opposition to it, is to kind of walk through the competition process, how we judge, how fish are judged, how we log them, and so forth. And I'll let Michael try to help get through that.
Well, like I said at the beginning, there's always a local tournament, something that is very inexpensive to enter, 20, 25 bucks. They're as low as $10. They run all month long, so if you work the weekends and get to fish on Wednesday and Thursday, you can still compete. They're usually open to either particular bodies of water or, like the one that Michael was talking about, is that it will be statewide. So you can fish any public water in Alabama for this tournament. Well, that opens up so much more water than if you were just fishing a tournament on Gunnersville Lake or Neely Henry or something like that. From there, we do what's called catch, photo, and release. So there will be a particular set of rules that you go through. A lot of them have, mouth closed on the fish. You can have your hand in a certain area. And all of our tournaments are judged by length. We don't do weight at all. So 20 plus inch fish usually put you in pretty good spots. And those are typically 4 to 5 pound fish. Anything bigger than that, you're getting drug around a little bit in your boat. But they're excellent ways to get into the tournament trail and figure out what you're doing without having all the pressure of 150 boats sitting around you. You're trying to back your trailer in and figure out where the line for weigh-in is. It's a great way to get started. And then these guys can talk a ton more about going into the national level and how that looks.
More on the actual tournament thing. He was discussing briefly the CPR, the catch, photo, release. And it touches on with what Joe and more importantly, Joe's wife was telling us about being mad about carrying the big girls that are spawning in the live well all the way back to weigh-in. So one of the things that kayak fishing does is it really takes a lot of pressure off those bedded fish during the spawn and throughout the year. Just the general health of the fishery. We can get in there, we can hook into the fish. We have these specific measuring boards that we have to use. We pull that fish out of the water, get the hook out. We have to set it on that board in a very specific manner. We take pictures of it that are geotagged. They have the GPS coordinates. It shows up on the map when the judges go to view that fish. We upload it to the app. The app serves as its own live well. It culls out your fish by length as you go through the day. So you don't have to adjust anything. You don't have to cull anything yourself. Every one of those fish is judged, approved, passed on. If there's a problem, a judge can contact you via your phone. But and then in some trails, after you measure the fish and take your picture, you have to video you releasing the fish, putting it in the water, watching it swim away, and then go back to the board so they can see that your board's not altered. They can see that the fish was healthy when it returned to the water. They can see that nobody's hanging on to a fish maybe, to pass to a buddy or something. Any sport, there are people that have some nefarious intentions out there. So they do a lot of these things to prevent people from cheating. So there's a lot of fail safes there that catch that. But all in all, that fish handling procedure takes about 45 seconds. So if you're on a bedded fish, a high pressure area where you're worried about if it's really hot, if it's really cold or something like that, you're worried about the health of that fish, it gives you a really good opportunity to get them back in the water super fast.
In speaking about the national trails, there are basically two trails that I fish. One is the Hobie BOS series, and the other is the Bassmaster Kayak series. Both of them have a series of regional tournaments around the United States, and the Hobie events are limited to 200 anglers. You register online, and yesterday was registration for a tournament that will be on Chickamauga in June. The tournament sold out in less than 9 minutes. There were a lot of people who would have loved to have been in that tournament that didn't have quick fingers, and a lot of people are on the outside looking in at this time. Kayak angling on a high level of competition is changing, and a lot of the anglers are sponsored. A lot of the anglers are rigged and prepared to travel across the United States. I'm one of them, and it's a different environment. I fish bass trails. I've been a marshal for the Bassmaster series, and have been around professional bass fishing for probably 30 years. Kayak angling is new, it's exciting, and the sky's the limit as far as entry-level participants. And I think that as time goes on, with fuel prices being as they are, you're going to find more and more people start to get involved with the kayak fishing. And there are plenty of mentors that will bring beginners. And I was a beginner at the age of 63. So if you're 14 years old or younger, or if you're 65 years old or older, there's always an opportunity for someone to mentor you through the process. And that's the one thing about our community that stands out to me. We're very giving, and we're very blessed to do what we love to do.
And the money's there now too.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I mean,
these like you
tournaments-
mentioned the Bass Open Series, or you got KBF with the Trail Series and Pro Series, and Bass Nation or Kayak Bass Nation for Bassmaster. I mean, you're talking payouts at the championships of $50,000, $60,000 and up. If you get, for instance, I think it was Cody at the NC last year for KBF. He won a couple of categories. You get up over $100,000 for that event. It's just for AOY stuff added on. But there's a lot of money for this KB or the Hobie BOS that sold out 200 anglers in 9 minutes, 270 bucks, 265 bucks, something like that. $265 entry fees, 200 people. You're going to be 8 to 10 grand payouts for your for number one. You're going to pay back usually what I think both of those trails do 10%. So I mean you got opportunity for really good checks. Bassmaster on the Kayak Bass or Kayak, I can never say their things. It's Bass Nation Kayak Series, right? Bassmaster Kayak Series. So there we go. That one pays back just like regular Bassmaster events. It pays all the way back 30 spots. Yeah. So I mean you'll get gas money out of that. And not to mention, like Joe said, the opportunities for sponsorships. I mean, we're starting to get the jerseys that look just like the other guys. Some of the guys that were sitting up here before are sponsoring. I mean, I'm on Missile Baits. John Cruz was just up here. They're starting to see the value because it is a business. There's a reason you guys are here, and it's buying boats, and it's buying tackle, and it's buying gear. And kayak bass fishing is a very easy avenue for somebody to get into it. If a guy's going to buy a $100,000 glitter boat, he's probably got a background, and he's probably got his mind made up on what he already likes. The kayak guys, it's very good market to sponsor. So if you want to get in and make some connections and learn, it's a really good avenue to do that.
Well, let me. I'm gonna go around you. All right. Well, I think we're gonna do a drawing. Did I knock your water off? So, guys, thanks for coming up here and talking some about the plastic boats. Yeah, definitely. And wow. But yeah, so we're gonna. I think Justin's gonna. Yep, he's gonna come back up here. We're gonna do some more drawings. Of course, everybody comes running when you give away stuff. Over to you.
Thank you, Michael. So the next thing we're gonna give away, this is gonna be a short little giveaway. We've got 6 bags, Ginger. We got 6 bags. These are from Big Bite Baits. It's a whole sack full of their 4-inch Rojas Fighting Frogs. There's one of each color in here that they sent to us. So everybody's gonna get 6 packs. I believe it's 6 packs. 6 packs.
All right, guys, thanks for hanging in there. I'm going to turn this feed off, and we'll start a new one. We're going to do some more giveaways for about 15 minutes.
Right, here we go.
And around 2 o'clock, we're going to have our last panel. Gentry Gordy, John Cox from National Professional Fishing League, and I think a couple other guys, but certainly some regional guys that know the waters around here in Alabama and have fished it a lot, so they usually have got some pretty good insight to share. So we will see you back if you're so inclined. Appreciate you tuning in and watching. Hope you get something out of it. We will talk to you guys here in about 15 or 20 minutes. It'll be a new feed.